Welcome to Yincast, our podcast for current and future leaders wanting to develop themselves further. Every month, the Olympic team discuss and share their thoughts on issues and topics that are common in the workplace.
So today on the podcast, we have Rosanna, David, I'm Alice, and we have our new recruit, Ben, with us, which is very exciting.
Hello. First podcast, very exciting.
And he is a trainee strategy facilitator. So you'll probably hear him on later podcasts as well. We are in the final episode of our team psychology series. It's a tool that we use a lot, and it was created by Tuckman in 1965. And it's just going through the motions of what a newly formed team will follow. So we've done an episode on forming, one on storming, one on norming, and then the final stage, which we're going to talk about today, is high performing.
Guys, we've made it. We've made it. So
Hurrah!
So how do we know that we've reached high performance?
Well, we were talking, weren't we, about reflecting on our own experiences, I guess, in the vein of Yincast. And we were talking about our recent trip to Wales and how when we're all coming together, we're all making our different ways there. And we all sort of had different experiences of our journey. What was that experience like? What was it like when we arrived? Did people arrive in a difficult frame of mind? Was it stressful? Was it not? Was it easy to find? I don't think it was easy for anyone to find. But we all had like different ways of getting there. And I guess then how do you then arrive, settle yourself, and then have like a good, constructive team meal, which we had.
There was a bit of not commotion, but there was a bit of bluster, I suppose, when we first arrived, wasn't there? After going to Waitrose to get our supplies.
Have you brought a takeaway?
Yes. So we instantly let the team down and failed at high performance. But
I think it's important though to think about the fact that was maybe a lack of communication, and so if we had communicated early and you knew that that was the goal, really was to get the food and the takeaway, maybe it would have gone slightly differently. But there was sort of this expectation that there was going to be this food brought back, but actually no one told you that. So
it was a minor assumption and then a misalignment of communication, which imagine if it had been a project requirement that somebody in one team thought that another team had covered, then you've got slightly more significant implications.
Yeah, and I guess when we were thinking about examples of high performance before we were recording this, we were thinking about, well, on one hand, it's you perform when you're relaxed and you're not thinking about it too much, but then the yang of that is actually when there's a problem to solve, oh, we now need to go and get a takeaway. Actually, we need to work out how we're going to do that. And so how we all then problem solve and just, who's going to do what. And it's a bit like, following the instructions, because we got told that the postcode doesn't take you to the location, so you're trying to work out different ways of doing things and ways of like following it. And it's just really interesting, like how that, like following instruction, working out the best way, and like and our journey was pretty. It was challenging to get there.
yeah,
I think it may be because it was primed as you're going to find this difficult to find. So you're like, oh, okay, I'm in the mindset of this is going to be difficult to find rather than this is going to be great.
Yeah. Interested to see how you both found the offsite.
I found it fantastic because obviously I'd only just started 2 days prior. So I found it an excellent way of getting to know people a lot better and getting more familiar with everyone else in the team. So I feel a lot more comfortable around you guys now than I would have done had we not had the offsite.
It was great for me. Really, obviously enjoyed the experience of being away with the team, doing things that are sort of outside of the normal scope of work, and blending that with the team building experience was you can't substitute that for anything. It's the only way I think you can do it, which is to be removed from the normal working day in a environment which is relaxed yet with some purpose. So despite our purpose being to get closer, do some work, and actually carry out a walk, get from A to B, with the walk having some activities along the way.
It's shared experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I
very
think
much so.
just having time together, it just helps you feel more comfortable with each other and trust each other more, and that'll come over time, right? So as we work together more, but I think it is about having that shared experience.
Yeah,
It's really valuable, and like that feels good, and there's a sense of accomplishment because we went on a walk and that was satisfying. So I think it is about just that proximity, and I think do working teams in a work environment, do they spend enough time outside of the work or the problem or the project, just spending time not talking about work? And I guess that's the yin point there, performing in relaxation, where you're not thinking about it too much, and actually just getting to know your kids' names and where you went to school and what's your favourite thing to cook on a Friday night, those sorts of things. It's that more connectivity, bonding.
that's a really good point. It's not necessarily appropriate to have conversations in the same way when sat in the office during a normal working day, because it's almost intrusive into people's lives when they're buried in an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is they're doing, to start talking about your favourite dish. Whereas when you're wandering along a path in Wales, it's actually fine to talk about anything. There's no holds barred. So that's a really good opportunity to get to know people. Might be worth us actually mentioning the other numerous new terms that we took as a result of map reading and
Learning that some of us didn't know how to read maps.
But I think the point about that is you can still be in high performance when things go wrong, and actually the ability to learn that you've gone the wrong way pretty quickly and that be okay, and check in that that's all okay, and then go and find the right path and do that quickly. I think in high performance you still make mistakes. I think things still go wrong. It's your ability to adapt and change quickly, which we did.
I think going back again to sort of making mistakes, we were talking before about how trauma or sort of emergency situations can sometimes sort of force us into that high performance, almost that fight or flight. And I think, David, you had an example of when you were at an event and something went wrong, but you worked through it into high performance.
Yes, there was a particular event I was doing in America, and we arrived rather fatigued on a Sunday evening to set up a stand for an event that was due to start on the Monday. And it turned out that we had graphics for the stand and the stand components themselves. And we discovered after some hours that after attempting to fit the graphics to the stand, that they were completely incompatible. And it was a Sunday night. So we had quite a bit of trauma there in kind of firstly understanding the predicament that we were in, and then attempting to rectify it. So we had to phone suppliers on a Sunday evening, which in itself in another country when you're tired after a long flight is hard work. And then luckily we managed to arrange for replacement stand parts to come first thing in the morning. So that was an early start, really early start. And then everybody came together as a team. Everyone kind of almost instinctively just slotting in where help was needed and carrying out whatever task was necessary to get the thing up and running before people started to show up. And of course, when you've put an awful lot of energy, money, getting people in there, setting up all the invitations and arranging to see people, it was everything amounted in that moment as a sort of an activity spike. But the way that the team came together, we went from a really low point up to a high performing point. And probably we were better for it actually on the stand by the time it all came together. And I think we were actually able afterwards to sort of look back, and there were numerous conversations around it. I mean, it's obviously a conversation starter.
And does it feel like a high performing team whilst you were sort of working that problem through, or was it on reflection, like the euphoria of actually somehow, however we did it, making it work? Was it during, or was it a reflection after?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection. If I'm honest, whilst we were doing it, we all knew we were doing it, but there was literally no time to stop and think. It was all hands on deck, getting things done. And to be fair, unless we'd have done that, unless we were able to do that, we'd have failed. We'd have been putting up our stand when people were walking around, which is not way to open on a first day of an event.
I guess it's interesting then to think about whether that's true of most instances of high performance. How aware are we when we are in high performance? Or is it something that we go, wow, that was actually on reflection something really cool? Or how well, and I'm interested to hear everybody's thoughts on that, but seems like where there's a trauma, actually the focus of just problem solving is the drive, is the goal, is the what unites us. We don't really reflect on it until after, and then it's like, yeah, that was really good. So how can we bring that reflection into the moment whilst we are high performing, and then can you then make it sustainable? Does it always have to include something going wrong to then be able to do it?
I think it's situational. I think it's a really good point, because if you've got a problem to fix, when it's fixed, you've done, and you know whether you've performed well or not in rectifying the problem.
Because it's a sense of achievement.
Exactly,
right.
Yeah. But in everyday life, when people are just functioning together as a unit in the office, and you're working towards sales or whatever it is, a particular project, a presentation, whatever it might be, you're working towards a date maybe, but it's not necessarily the same level of urgency. So you're not recognising the fact that you're performing as a team with any sort of synchronisation. And I don't know how many businesses that I've come across actually take the time to reflect on performance in the moment during the average working day. Do people actually kind of step back, take an external lens and look at individuals working in harmony and say, well, actually, that could be tightened up. That's going well.
Yeah, I think it's unconscious. I don't think it's conscious.
No.
I was thinking about the rowing team selection, and so it's likely in rowing that the 4 people that get selected for the boat A are not the 4 fastest people in training on the rowing machine, and the reason for that is not about my skill set, my capability to row really fast. It's about the combination of when those 4 people get in the boat together, they go faster because of technical things like weight and balance and rhythm of stroke, but it's more unconscious than that. It's about, I'm willing to work harder for these 3 people than another 3 people who technically are faster. And you don't consciously think I'm working harder for this person, and that's why that's why it's unconscious. But I think rowing test. You go into a boat and they'll do every single combination and they'll test that. And so most of the time, it's not the 4 fastest people in the boat. No. It's their connection, it's their sense of identity, and that's all purpose, intangible. It's not measurable. It's just on the day. This is what's going to unite us.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for rising to the moment. If it's a challenge or something like that, particularly in sport, or it could be equated to business. It's when you get a group of people who know that they've got to get X done, we need to do it in such and such time with these constraints, and all of a sudden that harmony that they can produce in the moment.
Belief and trust, isn't it? Really, I believe in the people around me that they're going to play their role even if that's a fundamentally different role to me. I believe and trust that person to do what they have to do, and I just need to focus on what I've got to do. But that trust that other people are going to rock up and deliver the best that they can do is self-fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as well, you've sort of highlighted another thing that's really important potentially in high performing teams, in that everyone knows what their role is, because it's so easy for something to get dropped or missed and just focus on, right, what's my role here, and just getting on with that.
Yeah, so that it's like, so that when you, oh, we didn't know we were meant to get the takeaway, it's like the clarity of who's getting the takeaway, guys. It's really important.
I think coming on to sort of our final point that we were talking about, leaders and authority figures and how they can influence high performing teams. So when we're reading our book, How Emotions Are Made, children mimic their parents or adults that are around, so authority figures, people they look up to, and how they copy the language, and how it might be the same within teams or within organizations. So if you're a leader, just thinking about, are you creating that environment for people to allow teams to be high performing? Do they know what high performing is, and do they know how to get there, and do you help them and provide them with that environment and opportunity?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think leading by example is something that you'll see, a characteristic that you'll see in all great leaders. Say setting the bar at a certain level, so that it gives those in perhaps lower tiers an aspirational position to aim for. And you'll often find that there's a form of mimicking which takes place both in terms of body language and verbal language that can occur when you've got somebody who's really smashing it. They tend to kind of portray characteristics which are kind of almost admirable, which gives those people something to sort of aim for and shoot for.
Yeah, it's just reflecting on all the things that come out of my mouth that sound like, oh, I think that's what Nick says. Nickisms. So definitely there is that hashtagging Nickism, are
yes,
we?
I think so.
Hey, crikey,
Yeah.
There'll be a lot. But it's, I think we do copy behaviours, but I think that's helpful because when you're, I mean, maybe the other sign of high performance is about mind reading, and really that's because you're sort of along the same path and you're thinking in the same way. So to the point about spending time together, but it's also about, I guess, that sort of mimicking each other's behaviours means that you sort of perhaps sort of just get there quicker. I do think we have an individual role there. I don't think it's just a leader's responsibility to say to run a high performing team. I think it's everybody in the team's responsibility to sort of flag when things are dropping or notice when you're in high performance. So I think it's easy to look to the leader and go, this isn't working. Oh, how can we make this better? But I think that if you're in the team, that's part of your responsibility. It's a shared responsibility to notice and reflect and think about the way that we could all change, not just other people, right? So I might have to change to make this team work better. I might have to step into my comfort zone. I might have to do something that I don't want to do. So I think leadership is really important, but I think sometimes perhaps there's too much of a focus on that position of driving a team to get the high performance.
But isn't that where a leader will have identified where those different skill sets are, where the strengths are within that team, and not only nurture them so that they grow and flourish, but actually utilize them to their best abilities.
I think you definitely need that coordinating thread though. Yes, there's expertise here, there's expertise there, and I think part of a good to high performing team is actually having that coordinator to sort of link it all together. And you were talking about a pitch where you previously worked, and it was like somebody would do that slide and another person with different expertise would do the next slide. But are we thinking about how the slides connect and what's
the flow.
The flow and the consistency of language and all those sorts of things, which is, if you look at things in isolation, you can all be excellent. This is the rowing point, isn't it? You can all be excellent and have the expertise, but if there's no commonality or thread or understanding, it doesn't make sense and it won't work in isolation. It's like the 1 + 1 = 3, and that's the sort of, you want that. What is that? It's just the beauty of when things are working and people come together and you get something better, more than the sum of its parts.
You've just conjured an image of an orchestra in my mind, where you've got all these different amazing sounds that all kind of take place in isolation. Great, but then bring them all together and then put a conductor in front of them to join them all up, and then all of a sudden you've got a wholly different thing.
Harmony and timing.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So to summarise then, we've spoken about the final stage of Tuckman's team psychology tool, which is high performing. So we've touched on measuring high performance. How do we know we're there? Have we had experience of that? And we've also talked about communication, the importance of communication in a high performing team, clear roles, the role of a leader in a high performing team, and working together towards a common goal.
I guess the final thing to say is, as this is the final Yincast of the year, wishing you a very happy Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you in January with our first Yincast of the year.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Yincast. We hope you enjoyed it. To get the heads up on future podcasts, you can sign up to our mailing list through our website, alembicstrategy.com, in the Get Involved section. If you enjoyed this, then you might also be interested in our other events. You can sign up to our newsletter for updates on our latest events and articles. Also, look out for Strategy Cafe, our regular leadership webinar, where Nick, our MD, interviews prominent leaders.